Meeting of the minds yesterday.
stripes and a bright song through the perilous sky. For the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets went high, the bombs bursting in, gave proof of the night that our flag was still there. Oh, sailors,
and gentlemen, and welcome to the annual commemoration. We'll now have the invocation by Reverend Eric Malloy, pastor, First Church in Charlestown.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for what we can commemorate here this morning. We thank you for the brave men who gave their lives that we might have our freedom. We thank you for the brave men and women who still continue to give their lives that we may continue to have that freedom. God, look over these proceedings. Look over us today as we remember fondly of what was given, the high price that was paid, that we might celebrate this freedom. We thank you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.
We'll now have a user selection, which is any way you like. User selection by Charlestown's Warren Prescott School Chorus. Now to bring the greetings of the J.W. Conway Bunker Hill Post, number 26, the American Legion, the sponsor of this commemoration program. Commander Al Snow, to say a few words of greeting.
Good morning, everybody. As he introduced me to as Al Snow, Bunker Hill Post 26. My family's been in this town for 141 years, and we've been in about every war there was since then. And it's very nice of you to come here, dedicate your time to watch us. All I can say is God bless you all, and God bless America.
Very good, Commander. Now to represent the Bunker Hill Monument Association, the people who brought us this monument so long ago, still an active organization. I introduce the secretary thereof, H. David Hennessy, to bring the greetings.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm really glad to be here today. I'd like to give you greetings from the Bunker Hill Monument Association and actually give you a little bit of background of the association itself. The association was the result of a breakfast held on May 10th, 1823 of 8 citizens. Those citizens got together and decided that they should be an association to memorialize the Battle of Bunker Hill. They went to the legislature and were incorporated as a private entity, and I mentioned the word private because it has no government involvement at all. Not that we dislike the government at all. One of the first things they did is 1825, they purchased 15 acres of land right here where we're standing today, which was Russell's pasture. Not Breed's Hill, not Bunker Hill, Russell's pasture, for those who are interested. Then 7 years later, they sold that land all around here. You'll see building lots, and that's what they sold the land for, to make money to build the monument. Bunker Hill Monument Association has always been an exclusive organization, so I'm not exactly sure how I got in. But in order to get in the association, you have to be sponsored by a current member. And over the years, there's been 30 generals, 20 admirals, 11 presidents, 20 mayors of Boston, 6 presidents of Harvard University, and thousands of clergy, doctors, lawyers, and distinguished citizens. The monument would not be here today if it was without the efforts of the Bunker Hill Monument Association. They came up with the idea, they launched the effort, they held a design competition, they purchased the land, they oversaw the construction, they raised funds over and over again, and they appointed superintendent for daily operations. For 77 years, they actually oversaw the operation of the monument, and there would be fees of 5 or 10 cents to get in to see the monument, and that was the money that they used to fund the operation. In 1919, it was turned over to the state of Massachusetts, and then in 1976, it was turned over to the National Park Service, who managed the site and helped educate people about the history of our nation. And we're very pleased to be part of the National Park Service and to assist them in any way we can. On behalf of the Bunker Hill Monument Association, thank you for being here to memorialize what happened so long ago, but it's such an important part of our nation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Appreciate it very much. And I just wanted to say what an honor it is to be here on the 242nd anniversary of Bunker Hill, Battle of Bunker Hill. I wanted to give a great shout out to you guys and girls and your teacher for the William Prescott School. Can we just hear it again? You guys were really awesome. Thank you so much. Wow. And I'll give a shout out to David. Thank you for your comments, David, on the association. And
like me, I once was lost, but now I'm found.
Constitution.
Huzzah indeed, sir. Welcome this morning to what can only be described as one of the greatest of days. It's weird to be a Navy officer here bringing you greetings on what is very much a distinctly land battle on our part. So it's good that the general's here to follow up a little later. But just one of those things that is to be remembered is that the ideals that not just my branch, but the general's branch, I believe 3 days ago, celebrated its 242nd birthday as well. Those ideals, the people, the principles that came to be right here in this city, in this region, and then across this country those 242 years ago. And the Navy itself also came to be in this region just a few months later when General Washington commissioned some Army officers to go out and arm up some ships. So I hate to say it, but technically we derive ourselves in a way from them as well. But I want to bring us back to that principle. The principles that our nation grew out of still apply today. Just like the missions that the Army and the Navy do on a daily basis around the world today were the missions that we started with to uphold those principles here on Bunker Hill and here in America. So just something to think about and leave yourselves with as you are here joining us, thankfully, on this Bunker Hill Day and remembering the sacrifice made by those so that we can live in the principled nation that we do. Thank you very much.
And thank you to each and every one who has made their way here to celebrate this day. We've gathered not just to celebrate this day, but to also remember the sacrifices that were made upon this sacred hill. We call this a monument, but it is a memorial for the men who fought and died. 1,100 men, farmers, laborers, merchants, and politicians, had just 3 days earlier formed the new Army of New England, and they stood against the most powerful army in the world, the British Army of King George III. These two great forces met upon this hill, both fighting for a cause in which they believed. The colonial army fought for their rights as Englishmen to choose their own destiny as they wished to separate from Great Britain. And then there's the British Empire. The army of Great Britain fought to preserve that empire and their way of life. It was that sacrifice on that decisive day that gave birth to a concept that we could be a free and independent nation. Now, 242 years later, we have achieved that goal. We are a free and independent nation, and we are the greatest of allies with the people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. This country gave birth on this hill on this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley, Bunker Hill Monument Association, Conway Bunker Hill Post 26 for allowing us the opportunity. Greetings, ladies, gentlemen, kids. It was 242 years ago today, as we know, that the Battle of Bunker Hill was fought on this ground and surrounding areas. Following the battle, in which Major General Joseph Warren, who, by the way, chose to fight as an infantryman in the trenches, was killed in that battle on the third assault and successful assault by the British troops. My great-grandfather was here on this hallowed ground. He did survive the battle, but those who died here, we return every year to commemorate those who have given the ultimate sacrifice for what we enjoy today. And I don't want to be repeating what others have said so much more eloquently than I can say. However, following the battle and following the successful independence of the new nation called the United States of America, King Solomon's Lodge, ancient free and accepted Masons, erected a monument to the memory of Major General Dr. Joseph Warren and his associates who were killed in that battle. The replica of that monument remains in the well of the current monument. It was erected by the Lodge 1794, but in 1823, the Bunker Hill Monument Association was formed, and in 1843, the current impressive obelisk that we now see was dedicated. And I have to say thank you very much for the Bunker Hill Monument Association, Conway Post, and all who have continued to bring forth and remember this every year. As the presiding master of King Solomon's Lodge, it has been our duty and our obligation every year to come down and rededicate the monument, and with this we've done on our own. But I think the greater message is that the battle that was fought here and those that sacrificed really did so for all of us, not just us. And so to be a part of this is very humbling, and I thank you, Mr. Hurley, and God bless all of you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Representative in the legislature for Charlestown and Chelsea District, Danny Ryan, please.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you all for being here today. As the 17th of June this year is out on one of the ships today, welcoming in the Sail Boston ships. And Sal DiDomenico, State Senator, is usually here, as is Sal Lamatina and Congressman Capuano. So if I go on too long, just know I shaved about 10 minutes off of the program by representing all of our elected officials today. In General Richie Johnson, I knew Richie before he was a general, when he's a kid from Somerville, hanging out in Charlestown once in a while, and also an alderman in Somerville. So a true citizen soldier, General Johnson. It's good to know a general. And you know, every year Bunker Hill Week comes by, and I learn something new from all the great people here who really study our colonial history and our Bunker Hill history. Commander Coots and the folks from the Bunker Hill Historic Society and the Bunker Hill Monument Association.
As part of the highlight of the program. Thank you, Arthur. Part of. Bringing in General Richard Johnson. I have a whole list of things that he's done. Most of you that know him from Somerville know more about him than I do. But for the rest of you, General Johnson is currently assigned to the land component of the Command of Massachusetts National Guard. He advises the Adjutant General regarding Army issues and is responsible for all aspects of training and readiness and force development for the Army National Guard. There's a whole list of places where he's been in combat. He is a soldier, and I think without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure and a deep honor to introduce General Johnson.
I don't usually need one of these, so I'm going to try to step back before I speak a little too loudly. I'm very glad that Commander Gillen didn't read the biography that they send when you go to speak somewhere. It's almost embarrassing. So for me, this is really home. You know, I grew up a mile from here. I went to school with some of your children. I went to high school with JP, Mr. Gillen. I played basketball at the boys club a block over here. I skated at the rink down the road there, and my daughter plays hockey still here in Charlestown and won a couple of state championships in the last couple of years. And I live in Somerville. I spent most of my life there other than my time away in the service. So I'm honored to be here. I've been here as a spectator. I've been in the parade. I returned home from Desert Storm 27 years ago and was invited to march in the Bunker Hill Parade as a young officer coming home from my first combat tour. I marched right beside Sean O'Connor, who grew up right there on Winthrop Street, who I served with in that tour. So I've got a great history here with people. I know a few people, I see a few people that I know here, and it's great. What I'd like to talk to you about, I didn't write a speech for a reason. I knew that speaking last, everybody would say some things that I didn't want to replicate, and I didn't want to keep you here too long. I wanted to get you free to enjoy the day, maybe enjoy the tall ships. So I think I'll fill in with some things that I think are important. What I'd like to talk about is the legacy of the Battle of Bunker Hill. what it meant at the time, but what it means to what our Army looks like now, what our services look like now, how our young soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines serve now because of the legacy of the early battles in the Revolution. So it was said earlier that the Army was born 3 days before this battle. They formed on Cambridge Common. There were maybe 3 officers in uniform in that first formation. It was about 1,100 soldiers, mostly from Massachusetts militia, some from Connecticut, and then a few from other New England states, I believe Rhode Island. But primarily they were made up of men from Massachusetts who were farmers, artisans, who mobilized as militiamen. I carry that tradition now as a citizen soldier. I have the honor of commanding the Massachusetts Army National Guard, and within our formation we have the 101st Infantry Regiment, the 182nd Infantry Regiment, and the 101st Field Artillery, and the 101st Engineer Battalion, all of which formed the North and the East Regiments in Massachusetts. They were formed on December 13th, 1636. So those are the oldest units in your United States Army. They're the oldest units in service. Right down the hill here you have the oldest commissioned warship in the world. So the history that's around us is something that I'm pretty appreciative of now. Those formations today are currently deployed in places like the Sinai, in Afghanistan, and believe it or not, in Iraq. Most people don't even realize we are still in Iraq and still fighting, not only in Iraq, but by extension in Syria from Iraq. So your units here at home, made up of citizen soldiers, are fighting all over the world still today, still representing that legacy that was born before this, but tested here at this location, at this site, 3 days after that army was born, if you can call it an army. So a couple of things happen here in Charlestown that are pretty interesting, and I'll talk to you from the perspective of an Army officer. So we think in terms of tactical, operational, and strategic. So many people would look at this battle on its face and say it was a tactical loss for the Americans, which it was. We ceded this ground to the British after the third wave. But on a strategic level, it was a great victory. And you've heard some words about that today. What happened immediately after that is probably the most important part of the sacrifice that was made by those 400 or so Americans who lost their lives here. They inflicted 1,054 casualties on the British force that assaulted them, a British force made up of about 2,000. Colonel Prescott made a decision the night before the battle to get here. He arrived at Bunker Hill. He was given orders to get to Bunker Hill and fortify Bunker Hill, to build a redoubt, to build and strengthen, fortify a covered position so that they could threaten the British position down the hill in the harbor across the water in Boston. When he arrived, for some reason he made a decision, a tactical level decision, to fortify Breed's Hill. Most people who aren't standing here with us right now don't even understand the difference. They don't know that Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill are 2 different places. They don't know that Breed's Hill was half the height of Bunker Hill, so if you're a military officer thinking about a land engagement, you want the high ground. They didn't take the highest ground. What they did is threaten the British from a closer position, and they antagonized them into the fight they wanted. That was a very risky decision. So I talk to young commanders now about assuming risk. Our commander assumed a risk, and there was a lot of risk, not just in the fight with the British, but there was risk within his own force. Again, remember, it was made up of a largely undisciplined force of farmers, artisans, regular people. And within his own force, there was doubt. There was worry. You can read some of the memoirs, some of the letters of the soldiers who survived that battle, and they talk a lot about the doubts within the force as they were digging in. They thought that they were being brought here for some political purpose, for a slaughter. Many of them didn't want to fight. As soon as the British opened up in the morning, it was 5 a.m. when the British realized that they were actually digging in on this hill, and they immediately opened up with naval gunfire. So there was a naval engagement, by the way, just so you know. Another important point is that the British commander, our force understood, the commanders understood the British mentality as well, and they antagonized them for a reason. at the time, thought among British officers was such that they had to engage a force that threatened them. They couldn't wait. They couldn't anticipate. They couldn't wait to dig in and develop a larger force. The British could have easily enveloped this force. If you know the geography here, it's pretty simple to figure out. Most of Boston was water around us. The actual city of Boston was almost an island connected by a small peninsula. This was connected by just the neck that leads to Somerville, Everett over here in Sullivan Square. So the geography really supported the British. If the British were patient and if their commanders weren't arrogant, they could have easily just enveloped this force and waited them out. They had 1 day of supply. They already ate it before they got here. They dug all night. They had no water, no food, and little to drink except a little bit of rum, which I guess isn't the worst drink to have before an engagement with a force like the British the next morning. So just to paint the picture for you what those men faced. And at 5 a.m. the British guns from those frigates in the water opened up on them. And the British at this time were the most powerful nation on earth. They truly fought the joint fight as well. So the British engaged naval gunfire with their ground force in tandem to put the most massive fire on the enemy. It must have been terrifying for those farmers, for those artisans, for those militiamen who trained once a month. But they stood their ground. They repulsed the British charge twice and probably would have stopped it a third time had they not run out of ammunition. So again, more decisions at the tactical and operational level. The logistics weren't there to support the fight. They marched out of Cambridge on the 16th of June, arrived here, dug in. They had about 6 hours to dig in. They were exhausted. They got behind covered positions, and then they endured 2 waves of assaults from a much superior force. But inflicted such damage on the British mentality, not just in actual casualties, but the damage they did on the mentality of those British officers changed the course of the revolution. So for those that look at this battle, I was actually in Washington this week, and I told a fellow general officer friend of mine that I was speaking at Bunker Hill, and he kind of jokingly said, you know, I don't speak at the commemoration of battle. I like to speak at commemoration of battles we won. You know, he was kidding, but I reminded him that the tactical loss here was an operational strategic victory that drove the rest of the revolution because it changed the way the British engaged the American force for the rest of the war. It changed the way the British fought here. And if, as you all know, I was in the Pentagon yesterday, and the Army flag carries 89 streamers for battles and campaigns. The first 3 are Lexington, Concord, and Boston. It doesn't say Bunker Hill, it says Boston. And that campaign, the lineage of that campaign goes from the day of this battle, June 17, 1775, through March 17th of 1776. March 17th was the day the British evacuated Boston. There's a reason the Army remembers it that way, because the strategic victory that was won here is the reason why, down the line, the British evacuated Boston. And ultimately, the strategic victory was won. The British, being repulsed on this hill, stopped them and made them think about what to do next. They ended up reverting back to their headquarters to rethink their engagement with the growing colonial army. While that was going on, you all know that we fortified Dorchester Heights, Prospect Hill, which was still Charlestown at the time. Sadly, I have to admit that. It's Somerville now. We like to claim credit for it, but it was Charlestown at the time. Yeah, we had to secede from Charlestown in 1842. So for some of the same reasons that the American colonists were fighting the British. So during that next 8 or 9 months, you know, some other key things happened. General Knox hauled a bunch of cannons back from Fort Ticonderoga, went 200 miles with cannons in snow, and was able to emplace those big guns at Dorchester Heights, dug in on Prospect Hill overlooking the British position in Boston. By the time March 17th came around, General Howe saw that his position was dire, and he withdrew to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and never came back to Boston. So we celebrate Evacuation Day, which is really a cover to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But in my mind, it's as important, if not more so. So I want to say to you that what was born on that day, these decisions that were made, the bravery, the courage of the men who fought, in spite of their fear, in spite of their suspicion, in spite of their doubt of their own ability to defend themselves, and in spite of their doubt of their officers, their leadership, of the revolution itself, they fought. And they may never have realized in their lifetimes the long-term strategic significance of what they did here. It's pretty important. And we spend a lot of time now trying to communicate that with soldiers. And our soldiers now represent our country so well everywhere they go. I've been to places like Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times, and sometimes the people there, the only thing they'll see that's American, that represents America and what we are, is that young soldier. And I can tell you that those soldiers represent all that America is in the best way possible. If you don't think of it in those terms, I wish you would. So that legacy goes on 242 years later. The British generals came here expecting to punish a mob. And what they found instead was an army that stiffened. They're too precious. We try not to make those mistakes. We try to make decisions with humility. We know our soldiers will fight bravely, but if we don't resource them, if we don't put them in the fight with everything that they need before the fight begins, then we're guilty as leaders of the worst crime. So I think a lot about that. I think a lot about what it means to be from here and some of the great history around me. I walked around it as a kid and didn't realize anywhere near what I should have about where I lived and the legacy that I have now, that I carry now as a senior Army officer. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for what all of you do here on the podium and the people who keep this going. It's not just about a day of celebration, but it is a day of remembrance, as was said earlier. And I take it pretty seriously. I think your Army today is full of the same kinds of courage, bravery, volunteerism that is our legacy from the days of June 14th, 1775, and so on, and into this battle where they were first tested. You'll find that everywhere you go in the military. We're an all-volunteer service. We're the best trained, best equipped Army in the world. And our soldiers at this time are probably the best educated, best trained, and most prepared Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard that they've ever been. And they represent you well. And I believe that it is from remembering the legacy of our humble beginnings and never taking for granted where we've gotten to. Remembering with humility as leaders that we learn the lessons from the past so we don't make the same mistakes that our enemies have made in the past. So I want to say thanks again for allowing me to be here. It's an honor to represent the Army and the Army National Guard as a local guy. And I hope that you enjoy the day. I hope everybody enjoys the parade tomorrow. And as I say on all of these things, enjoy the fun, but please remember the legacy as well. Thank you.
hear anything.
Company, and what? Breathe, man!
In honor of the Massachusetts men who fought and died on this hill, June 17, 1775, and the brave men from New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island who also fought and died on this hill, June 17, 1775. The Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, sons of the American Revolution, salute you. Hip hip! Huzzah! Hip hip! Huzzah! Hip hip! Huzzah! Dismissed!
Yeah, okay, Eliza.